Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV, as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. and the United States, as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, and products as we move through the 21st century. And today we're going to be talking about India up close and personal. I was there for almost a month, and we were traveling throughout the entire country, looking in very large mega cities like Mumbai and Delhi, which are both almost 30 million people each in those cities, all the way down to small villages of less than 300 people and everything in between. And it's a very interesting country, very dynamic, and of course it's an ancient culture, so that adds to the spark, the sizzle, if you will, and just the general feel of everything that goes on there. It's just a very vibrant place. And sitting right beside me is Richard, and he goes by Rich Winfield Lewis. He is the president of the Winfield Group and also the chief technology officer for Auger Marketing. And also he's a regular here on Emerald Planet TV as our, I guess we've labeled you the environmental special guest. Is that what we're?
Sustainability advocate.
Oh my gosh, we got more to the title. Okay. Anyway, welcome back. Good to have you here. So what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about India today, and this is really going to be a conversation. So we had so many interviews. I think we ended up doing over 30 television interviews over there in different areas, Rich. And it's just amazing what's going on in that country. And to see that India is about ready to go by China as far as population, almost 1.4 billion. Actually, some people say it's already happened. And,
really?
And they're the, according to the IMF and others, they're the third largest market on the planet, and right behind China and the United States. So it's just interesting, all the things that are going on over there. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a huge economy and big population, and they have a lot to contend with.
Well, and that's absolutely true. And we have this first map on here of India, and you just see how spread out it is. And look at all the neighbors. It has, Sri Lanka right below it. And then you have China, it's a northern neighbor, and Pakistan. It's a very active neighborhood to be in.
It is. And Bangladesh on the other side.
Yeah. Well, actually, Bangladesh just kind of cuts right up through there like a knife. And of course, you remember back at partitioning how that, Pakistan, Bangladesh actually were the same country for a while. And then they split and went their ways. And of course, just like they broke off from India itself.
A quick side note, Bangladesh now has its own problems related to sea level rising, which can impact India.
Yeah, and the one thing about it too, Rich, is that when I was over in Bangladesh a few years ago, is I was standing in Dhaka in the capital city, and the president of the Chamber of Commerce said, "Look across the street." And I looked across the street, and it just looked like, it was busy, and, it was on a corner and all that. And I said, okay. And he says, that's where the Bay of Bengal may be in about 20 to 30 years, by 2050. And if it is, about 50 million Bangladeshis will be displaced. And guess where most of them will be going?
India.
Going right across the border in India and Kolkata.
I read one estimate that said it may be as many as 75 million.
Yeah.
We're already seeing that with the refugees.
And see, that's up from what he was telling me, because that was the best and the brightest, came up with that through the UN as far as the 50 million. And now it's 75 million. So it's just like, if you look at this map, half of that country is almost right at sea level. And
half of Bangladesh?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And so when you look at it, and then all the rivers are going through there, and then the flooding that happens through the monsoon, and of course they removed a lot of the mango swamps that usually would break the typhoons and the heavy winds and things like that. So it's
and you can look at India.
It's a big area to say grace over it. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, you can look at India and see that most of that country has a coastline. And if you don't include Alaska, their coastline is twice as large as that of the United States. So if you have sea level rise, you're impacting at least 7 million people who currently live on the coastline in India.
Yeah, and I saw that statistic. You shared that with me, and that's, I mean, you did a fantastic job in research, and I saw the, you know, the quote on that. But if you look at Mumbai itself, it's 30 million.
Right, well, they said up to 40 million could be impacted. They're not including people that sort of live away from the immediate coast.
Okay.
It's just those people live right on the coast right now.
Not on the hills, because as you know, Mumbai goes up and down, undulating, and we drove all over that city about 6 or 7 times finding places. But if you look all around there, it's just like most countries. We have major seaports, and you have all that, and that infrastructure is going to be as challenged as what we have in the United States. And you know, if you look down at Norfolk, which is the largest military Navy seaport in the world, they're already building everything up 3 feet.
Wow. So
already doing that, because it floods on a weekly basis along the road that goes around Norfolk, Virginia. And so, you know, that's just a warning of things to come. But looking at this, Rich, when you look at this map, you see all these states and all that. What do you see? What do you know about what we're looking at here? Anything that strikes you?
Well, diversity of climates, diversity. I mean, it's a huge country. Lots of different areas, some warm, some cooler. Used to be very forested, not so much anymore, surrounded by water. Lots of big cities, mega cities, and a huge population. They have a lot to contend with.
Yeah.
There was good news, but India is going through what the U.S. did without the time frame.
Yeah, everything is collapsing time, particularly when you have almost 1.4 billion people.
And a lot of
have to deal with
impoverished
it.
people
Yeah.
don't have the infrastructure.
Well, and that's why we're going to, you know, we got some good news and all that, and that's what I found out when I was over there. And this is this will highlight the states. There's 29 states, and of course you got Delhi, the capital, New and Old Delhi, and I was looking at the statistics on that while I was actually in Delhi. And New Delhi was built a long time ago, so
By American
they
standards.
probably need a newer Delhi than what they have. But it's really you know, very beautiful. But the whole thing about this, the diversity you're talking about, diversity of crops, diversity as far as ethnicities, and you know, each one of these states actually are like little mini countries, so they have their own language. And so, you know, most of the people are linguists. They, you know, speak English, they'll speak Hindi, and then they'll speak 2 or 3 of the local languages. And each one of those has a local language. And so it's just, the diversity is just incredible. And going from Delhi, you know, again, 30 million, Mumbai, 30 million, and then going out into the area in Rajasthan, because we were in the high desert plains.
I was about to ask you, where were you on your 3-week trip?
Well, when you look at this, and it was almost 4 weeks. If I had a pointer, that would be great. But anyway, we were in virtually the whole center of the country. So we were in some of the largest states in there, and then also some of the smaller ones, like Haryana. Spent a lot of time there with the Sehgal Foundation. They're doing really good work. They have 300,000 farmers and 300 villages that they're working with. And then we're in Barabanki, which is in Maharashtra state, which is one of the most populous, but also one of the higher income areas. That's where Mumbai sits. And you can see everything there. But the one thing I noticed is we were at the agricultural demonstrations and expo in Barabanki, and just how prosperous the farmers looked. You hear about how poor the farmers are, and they're stressed, and the high suicide rates and all that.
Right.
We were there, 350,000 farmers that came to that event in 4 days. I mean, it was just like a sea of people just washing over you. So I stood out in the middle of the main street, right next to where we had our small booth set up, and people, it was just like I mean, literally, it's just like an ocean just flowing by you.
Wow.
And it just went for 4 days.
You're right about the images. The only images I've seen on American press are impoverished people, and they talk about the problems, never about the huge growing middle class and the wealthy.
The interesting thing about India, and we're going to leave this map up here because we've just about gone through this, but I think it's of interest. They have 375 million true middle class. Well, guess what? That's more than the whole population of the United States as a middle class, so you've got real buying power. Mm-hmm. And then the farmers, which are about 500 million of that 4 billion people, Modi, who is in charge of that country now, wants to double their income by 2022.
That's ambitious.
And they are working at it. I mean, they are really working at it. And it's just interesting to see it. But this is some of the statistics, and we can just throw this up here because you were a great guy and came up with it. But when you look at the growth rate, Rich, just tell us about that comparison with China and the United States.
Well, it's growing rapidly, supposed to surpass China as far as population by 2028, according to the UN. But like you said, different estimates, and it's very hard to calculate.
Yeah.
The economy is one of the strongest in the world. I think 6th largest by GDP, but also 3rd largest as far as buying power.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's China and America ahead of India.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're looking at China now. They're predicting that's going to be down, in the low 6s, and that's a real problem. Because with their population, even though they're not growing, I mean, China has the fastest aging population on the planet, even more so than Japan. And India is a very young population comparison. But when you go there and you see these 375 million middle class, meet people there, they're just like most families, just like what Mexico went through. They had 6.5 children as family size. Now they're down to 2.3, and that's in 30 years. Well, the Indians are going to, be faster at that.
Right.
Because they're traveling more. I mean, when you go to the airports, I was there about 8 years ago, back now. They had brand new airports, a year old, most of them, and they were tripling the size.
Wow.
Tripling the size, not doubling, tripling the size.
Yeah, the economic growth in India is pretty impressive. It's at, what was it?
No, you mean economic growth?
Yeah,
it's
6%?
No, it's 7.
Oh,
yeah, it's
7%.
almost 7.3, 7.5, something like that.
America's at 4%, and China has dropped to the 6%. That's what it was.
Yeah,
right?
And the whole thing about this too, if you could find out the money in all those small shops they have, I mean, they have millions of these small businesses. So it's a country of small business, really. And they have some of the largest corporations on the planet. It's just, the diversity is incredible. But anyway, Rich, thank you for just going over some of this as far as what India, where it is. We're going to talk now the next show about what's happening there as we create the Emerald Planet.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ripped off life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow! Oh!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
When it comes to saving money,
What?
don't act like a baby.
Oh, it's like they're having their own little meeting.
This is so humiliating.
Be the boss.
I'm the boss.
What the?
Power nap.
You were saying?
And make a budget.
Let's get to work.
Need a little help?
Stacy, read back the notes.
I can't read. What's it say?
Create a personalized savings plan and get other tools and tips
We can share.
You obviously didn't go to business school.
at feedthepig.org.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet, Emerald Planet TV, and we're looking at those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, products, and the processes that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And I was just in the country of India for almost 1 month, traveling from, one of the 2 largest mega cities. One is Mumbai, which goes by Bombay more now than I've ever heard in the last 20 or 30 years. And then, of course, Delhi, which is the new and old city, and just absolutely dynamic. And both of these are just almost like a heartbeat. You just feel it with all these people around you. And even though you're there, you're constantly around people, still it seems like there's space for you. And it's just a very interesting dynamic. This is Richard Lewis. He goes by the name of Rich. He's on Emerald Planet TV on a regular basis. Helps us as now he's adding more titles to himself with sustainability guru and environmental special guest. And also he has his own organization, the Winfield Group. He's the president of that, and also chief technology officer as far as our marketing and on Emerald Planet TV. What better way to do that? But what we're going to do is we're talking about the country of India, which I was sharing about that just a few seconds ago, Rich. And we talked about where it was, the map, and all those kinds of things. But now we're going to talk about some of the challenges they have over there. And we have this image of a burning, open garbage pit, actually. And this, even though when you get there, you don't really see this is actually going on. Mm-hmm. And when you travel through the country, you really do see it, particularly when you get out in some of their smaller communities, and talk about that. But this is the list that you and I have been chatting about, all the things that we have here. And the interesting thing about this, Rich, is you got, the air pollution, poor management of waste, growing water scarcity, all these things. I mean, all these are 100% true. But what, through the 50 different communities I traveled in some of these very large agricultural demonstrations and the expos, I mean, they're just absolutely embracing all these and trying to do something about it. And that's what was really interesting about being over there and in that society, because they realize that, they're choking themselves to death with all these cars.
Right.
We're going to see a scene of that. And I was in it on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you would be at a stoplight, and you'd be there, let's say you're 1 or 2 deep in the line, and by the time the light got ready to change, there would be maybe 10 vehicles in front of you. And these are cars, trucks, mopeds, motorcycles. It's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, a lot of congestion and very dense cities, less pollution control, so they're facing a lot.
Yeah, and going back to this whole thing too, as far as this, and we have some images that you shared with us. This whole thing of climate refugees, IDPs, internally displaced persons, is something that they're called as far as the UN is concerned. It's a very real concern for China, because it's not like the Bangladeshis, which have to come across the border into India. Because when you're in Kolkata, which is, the city there, the British Empire,
Famous
where actually it started,
right.
And it's right next door to Bangladesh, there's 6 million Bangladeshis along the railroad tracks.
Wow.
And they're hanging 8, 10, 12 deep in hammocks, and that's their whole house. The hammock is their house.
And I've seen the footage of whole markets along the railroad track, and they pull up when the train goes by and flop it back down. So you're living in a tent. When you hear the train
Yeah,
coming,
you're living in
pull up.
a hammock, actually, not even a tent.
Right, in a hammock, Right, but for the markets, they have a little tent stall. And
Oh,
when
yes,
the train
that's
comes
correct.
through, you lift it up, the train goes by, and you put it back. That's how densely populated.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. And they're there because they just have no place to go. And, of course, the constant flooding that you have in Bangladesh, and as you and I were talking about earlier, the estimate I heard by the Chamber of Commerce, 50 million could be displaced by 2050. And you read 75 million. And many of these people are already walking.
And that's just from sea level rise and water climate refugees. And we also have deforestation, I can't say it, which is causing a different kind of refugee, which ends up in the cities, which are already overpopulated.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it is you have Kolkata, which again is, is another one of these mega cities. It's 10 to 20 million or something like that. Actually, nobody really knows what the real numbers are because there's so many from Bangladesh there that they just can't count them, and they're just absolutely everywhere. But looking at the climate change we have on that and the sea level rise you're talking about, it's just some of these numbers. It's just like you were talking about earlier, the 7 million are going displaced by sea level rise. I think that number is grossly understated. When you're in these cities and you see these areas and you're looking out the ocean, and it's actually, on a calm day, it may be 1 or 2 feet below. You realize that,
and you
there's
see a sea of people
yeah,
up until the ocean. So, yeah, one of the estimates said there was 40 million people that would be impacted.
yeah, and this is, and you have this number here, the one you talked about, yours consists 75 million, and this is, kind of the best guesstimates. But then you look at India as far as the 5th largest emitter of emissions because they have so many huge coal-fired plants there. Right. And it's a very low-grade coal, so it's actually smoking. But the one thing I learned while I was there, it's not just the coal-fired power plants, it's all the brick kilns. Because they make many or most of their homes out of brick. Oh, yeah, and what they're doing is taking the lowest grade coal and they put them in, into these kilns. And so when you're driving down the highway, I saw 10 of these together.
Oh, wow.
And then what you have is that you have this huge curling black smoke going off, and it's going literally into the horizon.
Wow.
And that's one of them.
That's just one.
And then you got another one that's doing the very same thing. And so when you get there, you realize that we, keep blaming everything on power plants, but there's a whole lot of other things that are going on, plus, just the hundreds of millions of the vehicles they have. But this is one of the issues. In this area, this looks like what I drove across almost for 4 weeks.
I was about to ask you if you had seen that, because when I was there a long time ago, I didn't see any land degradation or deforestation. I saw the poverty and some of the pollution, but not that.
Yeah. If you're looking at, because we were traveling through Rajasthan, the western part of Maharashtra state, Haryana, and we're in Chhattisgarh, which is actually a new name for a state that was divided recently. So you have all these states, and it's just like no matter where you go, it's like you're on a high desert plain.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't mean you're that high above sea level. It's just the fact it's just bloody dry. And the water table in some cases is, it's hundreds of feet, sometimes it's thousands of feet below the surface. And so we're going to talk about the solutions to all this. We're putting these up here as far as what's going on. But one of the main things, this land degradation, is that we saw through the agricultural displays and expos. I mean, it was almost like a mantra. The farmers would come and see you, and talk about the issues and all that. It's just soil fertility and the low quality of the soil.
Right.
And so this whole thing of how do we enhance the soil, how do we reduce chemical fertilizers and pesticides, I mean, it's just a mantra. You just hear it. The elected officials are saying it, the farmers are saying it, the merchants, you go into the marketplace and see the vegetables, and they talk about, we have to have better vegetables that doesn't have the residue from the pesticides and insecticides.
All the food is tainted.
Yeah.
And they're facing the same things we did in the 60s in the U.S. and overcame a lot of them, but they still have to take that next step.
Yeah, and they're actively at it. And then you see this too, just like this, as far as the water is concerned, a lot of pollution. You'll see a lot of the towns where they, you know, there's no drainage system and all that.
Right.
So the street,
So
the
it's
field,
Right.
the shop, everything is just in one, you know, mass area. But everywhere you go, you just see construction going on, you know.
And
just-
toxic waste and,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
all that. And then, you know, freshwater resources, we've talked about that. But, you know, that's a real thing. Even when you go to the schools now, mandatory, they teach them how to wash their hands. You know, this whole thing of soap and
Great.
water and all that.
Fantastic.
And it's, you know, it's just what's needed. But this is one of the real issues, deforestation. And this is something you said that, you know, when you were there years ago, you didn't see it. But now you see it everywhere.
Wow.
And this is happening whether it's in the jungle areas, up towards the Himalayas.
Such a green,
you know.
or I remember it as being very green and forested.
Yeah.
This picture's terrible.
And it's, you know, it's very different than that. It's very dry because, you know, the whole country's drying out. You got so many people now that are drawing from the aquifers. The monsoons are shorter. They're
And
coming more
aquifers meaning
sporadic.
underground water.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
who don't know, yeah.
And then the water is becoming more and more brackish as they're using vast amounts for irrigation to provide for the food.
And more toxic and more polluted.
Yeah, and
right?
also you look at some of the land, it just looks white because of all the salt crystals that are
Oh,
coming out
gosh.
from the underground aquifers because they've gone down now to
So deep.
the brine, yeah. And so it's just, and here, like it says, the native forest 2.7% per year.
And that might not seem like a lot, but when you do that for 20 or 30 years, that starts to add
Oh,
up.
absolutely.
That's a lot of deforestation.
Oh, yeah, and that's and they're trying to get at this in the cities. They're trying to plant trees, get more under canopy because the cities are so hot. Because in the summertime in Delhi and Mumbai, it's 48 Celsius. Now, 48 Celsius translates in 122 degrees Fahrenheit,
And
and that's a day-to-day basis.
Very briefly, I know you know the answer to this, but why are trees so important?
Well, the whole thing is transpiration. You know, because you can capture, you know, the rain as it comes in, but also it's producing oxygen, it's
And
capturing the carbon, putting
capturing
that
carbon,
into the
right.
ground. So, I mean, the trees are just critical for everything. But we're going to end up on this, and this is exactly the right place to be, unbridled urbanization. When I first went to India, about 75% of the people there were farmers. Now it's right at 50% and dropping. Because
they're all
people are
moving to
doing
the
this,
cities.
what we see
Right.
right here in this photograph. They're moving in. This is the kind of the traffic I was sitting in almost the whole time I was in India.
And I
Just
remember
look at
seeing
it.
this too. It's just bodies and people and cars everywhere,
Yeah.
mixed in with cows.
Well, the one thing you don't find anymore, and when I first went there, you had cows everywhere, particularly in Kolkata. No, you don't see that at
Oh,
all
really?
anymore. In the very small villages, you'll see that. But in the large cities, they got rid of all that. They have special places to take them because you're not supposed to kill them and all that. But this is Richard Lewis. Richard, thank you for being with us, and let me reminisce about being in India for almost a month and all the things we're seeing. And now we're going to start talking about all the bright spots and the good things that are going on, because there's a lot happening there as we create the Emerald Planet.
For all the papas out there, let's stop what we're doing and take a moment to be with our kids. They can be loud moments, goofy moments, dorky moments. It doesn't really matter. Every time dads take a moment to be with their kids, it's pretty momentous. So let's all take a moment to make a moment today.
Hey, did you know that 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Go to theshelterpetproject.org and search your local shelters and rescues. Go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can stop to make sure someone is okay.
We can warn someone when their drink isn't safe.
And disrupt the situation.
We can.
Get someone the cab.
Or walk them home safely.
We can make campuses safer for our friends.
Our roommates.
Our classmates. Our fellow human beings.
We cannot be bystanders.
We can. Intervene.
It's on us.
All of us.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
When it comes to saving money,
What?
don't act like a baby.
Oh, it's like they're having their own little meeting.
This is so humiliating.
Be the boss.
I'm the boss.
What the? Power nap.
You were saying?
And make a budget.
Let's get to work.
Need a little help?
Stacy, read back the notes.
I can't read. What's it say?
Create a personalized savings plan and get other tools and tips
We can share.
You obviously didn't go to business school.
at feedthepig.org.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome back to the Emerald Planet as we come to you on a week-to-week basis looking at 144 different nations, and we're going to be talking specifically about the country of India, a very rapidly growing society, a huge population base of almost 1.4 billion people, and now we learned that it's actually probably the third largest economy on the planet. And that's without knowing how many of the millions of small shop owners, how much they're really making and what they're contributing into society. And that's something that the current government of India is trying to figure out, because it could be very well they're the second largest economy on the planet. But time will tell, and it's a very interesting place. But sitting right beside me is Richard, goes by Rich Lewis. He is president of the Winfield Group and Chief Marketing Officer as far as the Agra Marketing. And then he is the environmental special guest. And I think you added something, you're the sustainability guru. What did you add to it?
Advocate. You called me that one time.
Sustainability advocate. That's a good title. But anyway, won't you just kick off on this? This is some of your information you're going to share. I had a chance to see all this when I was actually over in India. So good news.
Sure.
Richard Lewis, take it away.
We've talked about the general idea behind India today and the geography and what they're facing as far as sustainability issues. But the good news is that they are tackling everything aggressively, and they have great goals with Modi in charge. Everything that we talked about, the pollution and the water and the deforestation, they're doing two things at once. One is they are the most aggressive, one of the most aggressive countries on the planet as far as changing that situation, becoming more sustainable, but they are also lifting a whole lot of people out of poverty and giving them power and electricity and clean water. So it's a great effort on a lot of fronts. They have wind power programs, the largest solar wind project in the world ongoing right now. This incredible program with LED lights. They're replacing all of the street lights in India and a lot of the households with LED lights in 4 years, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And they've dropped the cost by 80% during that time. I've calculated it somewhere. That's the equivalent of over 1 million homes. Is that right? I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be much larger than that.
3 million. 3 million homes will. That can power all of Manhattan every day. That's just crazy, the amount of power they're saving.
They're going to be saving as far as LED lights, and that's very, very important. So, and the whole thing about that, you know, everything that they're doing over there is just, you know, trying to do better and do it faster.
But that's why you were there. So what did you see when you were there in India for almost 4 weeks?
Yeah, well, everything you're talking about, let me get over to one of these images. This is one of the things here. This is all about forestation. And you see that everywhere, people talking about trees, trying to plant trees. But also, just like the trees, they're putting gardens absolutely everywhere. So all the schools now are coming up with their own gardens.
Fantastic.
They're producing food for the school itself. And they're actually trying to get it so that they can actually produce even more than enough they can sell in the local markets to start earning income for the schools. But the school children, you see these green outfits they have, the green and white. This is something that you just see, everywhere as far as
So that's very intentional. I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just, I mean, they're just. It's amazing what they're doing as a society. I mean, it's the world's largest democracy. It's a very noisy place. I mean, they're, in some ways, they're very quiet and serene. Others are very loud and boisterous. So it's a noisy democracy, but at the same time, they're very purposeful. And so it's just, it's a fun time to be there. And so you talk about, the planting of trees and all that. But why don't you talk about the carbon credits? This is something that's India's going after in a big way, and the United States is getting left behind by virtually everybody on the planet.
It's a shame. And really, virtually every country on the planet, except for North Korea and America. So every other country has carbon credits. And the way they work is that a company or industry can decide that they will only generate so much carbon with their efforts, whatever they're doing. If they go over, then they have to buy more carbon credit from a different company, a company that is a good steward and only produces X number of carbon, which is less than their quota, can then sell that to another company which did not do as well. So you have very strong economic incentives, and this is by country, by industry, by company. America did not do that, so we do have some great private organizations that are doing this. In Chicago, they have one. But basically, if you set your own limit, you try to reduce your carbon output. If you don't meet that limit, if you start going over, you have to buy more credit from a different company, that performed better as far as carbon output.
Yeah, and you can actually buy it, for as far as the countries as well, because many people here in the United States, they want to reduce their carbon footprint, or they want to do the carbon credits, so they're planting trees in Brazil, or they're planting trees in Bhutan, or country of India, and all that. And this will give you a little bit of the good news as far as the carbon credits are concerned. But one of the things that Washington, D.C., right where we are, Rich, is they have actually for a stewardship of stormwater retention, and they have stormwater retention credits that you can buy in that. So this is something that is unique to Washington, D.C., and it's actually being looked at by communities all over the United States and around the world. But going back to this carbon credits, this is something that they're doing. It's an open democracy, and they're in some ways as much or more free market than the United States is, particularly in this, to meet the Paris protocols as far as limiting climate change. So it's something that's very, very important. UNESCO's, what are these?
Right, these are great, and India is the pioneer, promotes them more than anybody else and utilizes them. They're companies that were formed specifically to make a profit by saving money on clean energy, by saving consumer money on clean energy. So if you lower the cost of clean energy, you earn a profit. And they popped up all over India. Some of them are huge, and they're doing an incredible job. The one that we're showcasing for this show, I forgot the name of it specifically, but they are the ones that have reduced the price of LED lighting by 80% in a few years, and they are also helping to implement the change from traditional lighting to LED lighting all around the country and every single street light in India. It's a huge project. They're on track. The goal is to be done in 4 years.
Yeah, and also too, you can put LEDs as far as stoplights are concerned, so you're using much less power there. And then also too, they're trying to have more and more of the stoplights, the street lights, all that, to have their own solar collectors and power that. So the thing of having LED is that you're actually making, the drawdown of the power. In other words, instead of having incandescent lights, or just like the studio. This studio was all incandescent lights, and this had to be chilled in order to make it habitable, when you're doing the TV program. Now it's LED. It's very comfortable.
It is comfortable.
And
I'm not
it can
sweating.
actually be a little bit cool at the same time. But having these energy efficient companies, this is go ahead.
Can I mention one more thing about the LEDs?
You can mention whatever you want.
At the same time in India that they're rolling out the LEDs, they're also rolling out electricity to places that never had it before. and implementing the LED lights all at the same time. They say it's a mixed economy because they have a traditional Western economy like America, but they're also lifting all of these people out of poverty and giving them power and clean water.
Yeah, yeah. And lifting people out of poverty, it goes back to those 500 million plus farmers they're talking about, and giving them a livable wage. And what they're doing there is that they're going organic as fast as they can go. Wow. And this is, you know, the farmers across the country. They're also doing, you know, very intervention ways as far as drip irrigation, even using it for sugarcane now instead of flooding.
Neat.
And then with the vegetables and trees and all that. So it's just an amazing country and what they're doing and how they're just embracing new technologies. I mean, you've got farmers there in the fields with oxen plowing, and they're talking about drip irrigation.
Right, which is amazing. Drip irrigation only saves water, but it also can use unpotable water, like dirty water, for the drip irrigation because plants don't care.
Yeah, yeah, and the whole thing about too is what they're doing is that they're limiting the amount of fertilizer because it's going through the drip irrigation. So it's putting, you know, a minute amount of fertilizer to that plant, and it's predetermined how much it's going to get. And also with precision agriculture, which they're now also doing with satellites, they can fly, you know, sweep over the land, tell you, okay, you need potash here, you need more nitrogen over there, you need phosphorus somewhere else. And so they can actually tailor, you know, all that to it.
So that's helping the groundwater as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
This is all about the LED initiative, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that's critically important. And we went through some of that. And this is something that you brought to my attention. This is huge. Tell us about this.
It's literally huge. The largest solar hybrid wind power plant or project. They call it a project. It's not a plant. It's a huge area.
Right.
And all they did was, it is a wind power farm and a solar farm. It's a flat, dusty area that had no use whatsoever. And so they just converted it into an energy generator. And is this the one, I think, where we said that it's the equivalent of 4 Hoover dams already generating power, and that's the 3 million homes, I believe, if my math is right.
Yeah.
And it's not even finished, and they're already powering the equivalent of 3 million homes. And it's incredible that they're putting this much effort into it, and it's successful. I don't have enough good things to say about it.
Yeah, and what I like about this, and we're just about running out of time, but if you look at this photograph with all these solar panels, the land that you see behind this is exactly what I was driving across almost for 24 days. In every direction, we were going north, south, east, west. And this is about what you were seeing on a regular basis because, you know, it's just so dry. Now, they do have jungles, and you go up to Himalayas, they got glaciers, and they have all these other kinds of things. But the interior of India looks a lot, you know, this color of this brown soil that we have there. But anyway, Rich, thank you for sharing this information with us, and thank you for being on the Emerald Planet TV. This is Richard Lewis, and he's the Winfield Group and also Auger Marketing, a good friend of Emerald Planet. He comes on with us with a regular basis, and we'll call him the environmental special guest. And it's always good to have you with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us as we look at the country of India, the good things that are going on there as we create the Emerald Planet.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America, is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing now.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, and welcome to the Emerald Planet TV as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. and the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, and processes as we move through the 21st century. I'm the President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet, the Emerald Planet TV, and I have sitting right beside me is Richard. He goes by Rich Winfield Lewis. He is the president of Winfield Group, and also he's the chief marketing officer for Auger Marketing, and sustainable advocate for the planet, right? Right. And then also the environmental special guest for the Emerald Planet TV. So we're glad to have you here. But Rich, this week we're talking about India because I just got back from there. 24 days in country. I met I don't know how many thousands of people because I was at some of these national and international agricultural demonstration days, as they call them. Some of them were 4 days, some were 5 days. And one of them had 350,000 people.
In almost 4 weeks. That's a long time.
Yeah, I tell you, and we went through a lot of communities. And I say 50, but that's really an understatement because we may be in 10 different places in one day. Because we'd start at 7 in the morning and go all the way till, 11 o'clock and head back into town. But I wanted to kick off with this scene here, Rich. We think of India, we think of it as a dry place, which I've talked about that. We think about it as ancient society and people plowing with oxen and all that, which they still are. Also, you see lots of modern tractors. But this is the Baramanti, and this is the Agricultural Development Trust, which goes by the Indian KVK, and this is what you're looking at. Now, this is one of the largest research stations in all of India. It's 110 acres. Wow. And I say we're looking for 1,000 best practices on Emerald Planet TV. Right. There are 1,000 best practices
right there.
Here.
It's right beautiful here. Property.
Yeah, and this has been evolving over the 3 generations now. So it goes back to the 1940s and really predated that when the British were still there, as the colonial power as far as bringing water into this area. But there's 110 acres, and they have, you can see in the background there, the hot houses. That's a Indian-Dutch joint venture. There's some German-Indian joint ventures, and even some United States firms.
It's very green. Did that used to be sort of dusty soil?
This used to be desert.
Wow.
With no water.
Looks like a tea plantation. It's very nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And what they've done is that they're perfecting, like much of India now, in water harvesting. And so actually I interviewed, and we'll have him on probably in the next few weeks, the Minister of Water Conservation and Water Resources and Irrigation. That's his official title.
Interesting minister.
And he has a few more portfolios than that. But virtually all the states, the 29 states now, have a minister somehow for water because it's that precious. And with 1.4 billion almost people, Water is, is the essence of life. But this is. I was here 4 days in this facility, and if you go around this big circle and down the back of that, that's actually where I was stationed there to do the television interviews, and had a chance to walk around this whole thing for 4 days, and it's just an amazing, amazing place, and much research is going on there, and so the world actually is coming to Badamonte. And because of what the uniqueness of that and what's going on, and how they're doing, the vegetables, the row crops like sugarcane and maize and all those kinds of things. So, anyway, this will give you a close-up of the headquarters of this place, and you find these KVKs. These are at the all over the country. These are nonprofits. And so the whole thing is that we need to have this integrated into society, and that's what the Indians are actually doing.
I like their green wheat logo.
Yeah, this is actually for the country of India itself. And this is a grain, so this could be wheat, could be rice, it could be whatever. Grain. But their whole thing about it, it's and this is something that this particular group we're talking about right now in Badamonte with the Agricultural Development Trust, the first lady of this has actually started a program for women to integrate them into business, small business, education, to make sure they're fully educated, and then to give them funding and all that as far as the young girls. And so they're trying to teach them the principles of entrepreneurship.
Great. Micro loans, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
And that's very important. But this is the kind of things you see. Now, you give seminars and all that. Tell me what you see in all this. What do you see happening here?
See a lot of students paying rapt attention, which is good. I see diversity in the mix. Is that men and women?
You have.
It's hard to tell from.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see that. You will in a couple of other frames.
Very
you have there.
modern, urban looking too. Yeah. Very contemporary.
And what they're doing here, this is they bring in farmers from all over India, and so this research facility and all that is going, almost 24/7, 365. I stayed in one of the guest houses they had there, one of the first. It was very, very nice. And then they had larger ones that they keep expanding to bring more people in. Yeah. And then they have dormitories for a lot of the farmers.
It's a well-attended class, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to get on a waiting list, to get into this.
Oh, wow.
So, and a lot of this too, if you're looking at like the bottom two pictures, a lot of this are what's called train the trainer. So they'll bring 2 or 3 of the leaders out of community, say it's 5,000, 10,000 people. They send them back in, and then they share that with the farmers there, because the farmers will listen to other farmers.
So the classes specifically are on how to grow crops better,
could be anything.
Utilize water.
It'd be how water conservation, forestation, could be green building principles. I mean, anything that's going to impact the farmer. So it goes from house to the fields to the barns to the cattle and all that. And very modern facilities. And of course, when you go out to the farm, some of these are just like you're step back 1,000 years.
Right.
But at the same time, they're doing very modern things. And this will give you an idea of what you see as far as these hot houses are concerned. So, they have tomatoes and they have, all kinds of peppers and capsicum.
How large are those, the tubes? Are those small?
These are actually very small because there's no earth. There's no dirt in there. Yeah, no dirt in that.
It's a neat idea.
But as far as these, the growth bags that they have there, this is one of the gentlemen that we actually interviewed. And what they do is they put this over the plants. They grow like 3 times larger than ones that are just exposed to the normal outside air and all that. It's all drip irrigation. They control the fertilizer, so they're reducing greatly the amount of chemicals that are going into the plants because they want to reduce the amount of the insecticides, pesticides, the residue. as far as, you know, the plants themselves. And
That's
the,
great. This is
and
like
the
4-H
produce.
with sustainability. Is that you?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is one of the interviews because we're doing a lot of television interviews. This young man is a PhD standing in front of me, and he and the gentleman around him, they're all farmers. And they're well educated, and you can see how they're dressed. They're very nicely dressed, very well-meaning and purposeful. But they have started their own social media platform.
Fantastic.
And so they're now, I think they're at 50,000 and growing, you know, by thousands, you know, on a month-to-month basis. And this is only for farmers. And they're getting it out, so they're talking about financing, markets, how to grow, how to conserve water. I mean, water just keeps coming up over and over. And then right behind me, over, you know, behind me, you see more of those growth bags we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing how the difference it makes as far as what's going on. And then getting back to the women, you can see these sewing machines. And what they're doing is that they're not just dealing with the male farmers. And what we found is that there's actually more and more women that are becoming farmers themselves. Which
they're
is,
farmers.
Yeah, they're farmers themselves, and they're doing it on their own, which is, you know, a total switch from, you know, what you think about over there. But they also want the women in these villages to have more opportunities to earn their own income.
And I'm assuming these are the pedal-powered sewing machines?
Yes.
Not electric, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because a lot of even though you see electrification, I mean, you're in a village, actually the power lines are going over top of your head. It doesn't mean they're hooked in.
No power.
Well, and they also have, you know, certain hours of the day. So you may have power for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon or evening, and then you have 2 or 3 hours where they've actually turned it and giving it to another community. And so because of just the tremendous demand for energy, it's being rationed.
I understand it, but regardless of that, it's very environmentally friendly to have foot-powered sewing machines.
Yeah.
We should do more of that.
Absolutely. And these are some of the experimental gardens they have there, is how do you grow this bigger, better, faster, more nutritious with far less chemicals.
Is that
being
corn
used?
on the
Part
top
of
left?
it, yeah. There's
those are large
corn,
stalks.
yes. Well, and what you find is that much of the vegetables, you know, what we consider a head of cauliflower here, maybe this big, you know, what they are looking for is maybe 2 to 3 times the size of that.
Wow.
You know, watermelons, you know, just huge, and cantaloupes, and the tomatoes, and again, this will all come out in some of the future television programs we're going to broadcast. And this is how to grow, you know, more fruit and to reduce. Everything is reduce the use of chemicals of all kinds, reduce the amount of water, and increase productivity, and increase the value of the crops. So it's just amazing what they're doing over there. And this is just going on day in and day out. And this is the areas where they're doing the water harvesting, putting in a check dam. And then they have these underground wells that they're just filling with water whenever they get rains, because it may rain for 2 or 3 months and you don't get it for the next 9 months.
Fantastic.
So Richard Lewis, thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet TV. Thank you for coming up with some of this information and the slides that you're willing to share with us. And thank you to our viewers for being with us as we're looking around the globe, along with Richard Lewis, as we create the Emerald Planet.